Hello and welcome back to Kim Reads as we continue with Great Expectations. Chapter 3, Capture and Confession. I stumbled backward from the shoulder thinking, they know I'm a thief and have come for me. Joe grabbed my arm and kept me from falling. The soldier smiled at me, then looked around. Excuse us, ladies and gentlemen, he said. I am a sergeant in the service of the king. My men and I are in the hunt for convicts and need the service of the blacksmith. That's the blacksmith, said my sister before Joe could speak. What do you want with him on Christmas Day? We need these handcuffs fixed. The lock is out of line. They will be required soon. My sister motioned Joe forward and he examined the cuffs. I'll have to light my forge, he said. The repair may take an hour. That's all right, said the sergeant. We have orders to close in around the convicts on the marshes a little before dusk. So forge away. The soldiers entered and stacked their arms in a corner. Then all of them, except the sergeant following Joe, now in a leather apron, into the forge to help the speed work. Uncle Pumblechook invited the sergeant to the table and poured him some of the wine he had brought as a gift. Soon the party became merry again, and while in background we could hear Joe's hammer. In return for the repair of the cuffs, the sergeant gave permission for our group to follow behind his soldiers and witness the capture. Only Mr. Wopsle and Joe accepted. Mrs. Joe let me go too, warning her husband, if you bring that boy with his head blown to bits by a musket, don't look to me to put it together again. We went straight to the churchyard where I'd seen my first convict. While the soldiers searched, I began to worry that the convict would think I'd betrayed him and brought the soldiers to the spot. When they found nothing, they moved on. By now, a bitter sleet had begun pelting us. Suddenly, a shout sounded in the distance. With a sweep of his hand, the sergeant commanded his men to run towards it. More shouts came from the same direction. Since I could not keep up with the long strides of the men, Joe swept me on his shoulders back and hurried after the soldier. As we got close to a ditch from the water was splashing and mud was flying, we heard the two sergeants shouting, Surrender, you two, come apart. The soldiers stood at the top of the ditch with their muskets leveled at the two struggling figures. When the men refused to obey, the soldiers dropped into the ditch and dragged them out, bloody and panting. My convict was in a rage, as he and the other man were both handcuffed. Remember, he said, I took him. I gave him to you. The other convict, the one with the bruised face, was badly battered, and he had to help him stand. He tried to murder me, he gasped. My convict snorted. If I had tried, I would have succeeded. No, I wanted him alive so I could turn him in. I dragged him back here for you. And then he pointed to the sergeant. You don't see any iron on my leg, do you? I could have got clear away, but when I knew he was going to be free after Val, I refused to let that happen. I wouldn't let him profit by means of my escape or be free to get me in trouble again. Enough, ordered the sergeant. Torches were lit and guns were fired as a signal to the prison ship to send a boat. In the flickering light of the torches, my convict caught sight of me. I looked at him eagerly and moved my hands away and shook my head, trying to assure him that I had not let the soldiers hear. His eyes gazed into mine for a moment with a look that I could not understand. Soon we began to march in the river where the convicts were led to the boat. Just before going aboard, my convict suddenly stopped and turned to the sergeant. I want to say something, he said clearly so all could hear. I stole some food and brandy from the blacksmith's out in the village. It was a pork pie that I took. Joe said, why, my wife just missed that before we came here, but we don't begrudge a starving man some food, do we, Pip? I shook, unable to speak. The convicts stepped into the boat and were rowed to the prison ship. The rest of us went home. And that's the end of that chapter. See you later.